Welcome back to the Morning Brief. We've talked sports. It's now time to shift gears to other issues of national importance, and one of them is the issue of security. And with what we've seen last year into January and now February, it has to be on the front burner so that we will continue to explore all the options to make sure our people are safe, as promised and enshrined in our Constitution, that the welfare of citizens and their protection and security is the primary responsibility of government. That's why we're being joined on the program by the pioneer commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force via Zoom, Brigadier General Jonathan Temlong, retired. General, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure. Good morning.
General, I know that this is your area and you've been following development as far as security is concerned. And I'm wondering, there's been a lot of talk about what to do, what not to do. We're looking at options and all of that. I don't know what options that you think that we've not really discussed when it comes to national security that you want to bring to the fore to the authorities to begin to consider, given the fact that you're a pioneer commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force. You saw things uniquely. I don't know what unique things you're observing that maybe some of us are not seeing that you want to propose on the show to the government.
Well, I think, thank you very much. I think what I have been saying is that when we say security is everybody's business, what do we actually mean? And how do the citizens come into it? You know, in your initial script that we played, the speaker was talking about strengthening the national security infrastructure. But that national security infrastructure does not just stop at the federal level. It's supposed to cascade to the states and the local governments. The national security infrastructure actually should be a citizen-centric national security infrastructure. And that leads me to policies that were enacted by the governments, previous governments, that are just lying in the shell. And they are not even domesticated by the states and local governments. The National Defense Policy is a citizen-centered policy which talks about the roles of the citizens in national defense and national security. Now, how do these citizens fit in? It's just like you say a citizen has an obligation to remain alive when he has an accident or he has a cut before the medics come. That is giving first aid to himself or citizens around them or colleagues, people passing by, should be able to give him first aid. But do we have that in the national security sector too? That citizens are involved in getting timely intelligence to the security agencies, and how do they send this intelligence? And is there any means of accountability to see if you call the police, for instance, that you are being attacked in your home, kidnappers are attacking you? Is there any accountability to say the response time of the police, whether they responded or not? Can we hold somebody responsible, or we just assume it's business as usual? If there are no sanctions, no accountability, these things will not work. We are always talking about a state-centric security. That's just security dealing with the safety of the state. Those were Cold War era's definition of national security. The definition of national security now deals mainly with the human security aspect. And human security involves even food security, the environment. Right now, you have problems with desertification. People are forced to migrate down, so infrastructure or facilities that are there available are being overstretched. So what are those things going to cause? Friction. Even political security, even education security. Do we have that? Are we looking at that seriously as a nation? food security. Are we looking at that seriously as a nation? When the federal government talks about food security, is it only at the federal? What are the states doing to ensure food security? Because these are the whole gamut that cause for security. It's not the armed forces and security forces that give you security. If the citizens are well fed, they are well engaged, they are active, you will get security. The security agencies that are there to say, look, if you cross the line, you will be dealt with. So that assures the citizens who are law-abiding to know that to be law-abiding, you are being protected by the state. Now, what about the criminal justice system? Have we done much about it? The Chief of Defense Staff told us here, including everybody in this country, that when Boko Haram are arrested, the next minute they take them to court or they are released. And they go back, go vicious. Kidnappers will threaten even the policemen and say, look, when you arrest me, well, my people are going to come. They will release him. So there is these are something that are seriously missing. Because if somebody knows that if he commits an offense, he will use the process of crime to go and get himself out, or his colleagues will use the process of crimes to walk through the same system that is supposed to protect the innocent citizens and get him released, security will be a mirage.
There's a lot to talk about. Brigadier General, pardon me, let me come in there. There's a lot to talk about as far as the judiciary is concerned in tackling insecurity when we look at punitive measures that should be more appropriately deployed. But let's stick with the federal government before we look at other arms of government now. Speaking about the Speaker's optimism for a review of the security architecture, let's look at the budgeting system, the envelope budgeting system that the leadership of the armed forces has had cause to talk about in the past. And this closed scrutiny of the budgeting system, what are your expectations from that process as far as the 2024 appropriation bill is concerned? If you consider that the leadership of the armed forces is talking about welfare, most of the officers are on 50,000 naira per month, especially those on the field, and all the other issues of equipment and infrastructure. What are expectations from that process for 2024 budget?
Well, thank you very much. My expectations are not very optimistic because there are certain fundamentals that we have not been able to do. One, the budgeting system of the armed forces or Ministry of Defense is different from the way you do normal budgeting. Unless we agree with that. The budgeting system that was recommended is the planned program budgeting system for the armed forces. That means you have plans, you have programs, and you fix naira and kobo to what you need, the capabilities and capacities to be able to achieve those plans and programs. So envelope system will not even work for the armed forces. You are just doing something that is an aberration. Now, the second other aspect which you touch critically is that the most important thing in the armed forces is the personnel, because no matter the arms or ammunition that you bring and you buy, the man behind those guns are the ones that makes the difference. And if his morale is not high, if he is not catered for, then there is going to be a serious problem. In fact, our saying in the armed forces is that a soldier marches on his stomach. And for goodness sake, a bag of rice and a salary of a soldier cannot buy a bag of rice. And don't forget, those soldiers look as those of us who have commanded and taught them and trained them with the zeal and enthusiasm and the patriotism we put in. And then they see our state in retirement now. They know that when they retire, they are just going to be like us or even worse than us. So it's a holistic thing. While looking at those in service, you have to look at those who train them, who have served them and commanded them before and are out of service. And that brings the welfare of the veterans is never played with in any country except here in Nigeria, where I see veterans moving cap in hand, looking for food, looking for medication to buy, to save themselves. So you have to look at those things, that the salaries of the armed forces personnel is never compared with civilian salary structure. What we have done in this country is an aberration. The El Rufai committee that sat down and did those things is an aberration. You don't even compare ranks of the armed forces with civil ranks. The armed forces have a specialized this thing. In fact, it is only the armed forces that are given what you call presidential commission for officers. So it's not that the oath he's taking is far heavier and weightier than any other office a person takes. The responsibilities on his shoulders are quite heavy. You can see the men that he commands. Any mistake he makes, the officer or even the NCO, has a cascading effect right down to his family and his community.
Right.
So for you to give orders or lead men and put them in harm's way, you have to be special.
Absolutely.
And the government and the country has to be behind you to know that, look, if you put your citizens or your soldiers or armed forces personnel in harm's way, you are there for them. So it has to go beyond just putting those infrastructure. Is the national will, is the nation behind the armed forces personnel? And if they are, what are those things they are doing to show to the armed forces that this is a grateful nation for your sacrifices?
Indeed.
These are the building blocks that makes a strong defensive or a strong national security infrastructure. It's not going to talk every time on this thing. And you should not forget too that defense procurement are not like the same thing as going to procure things for the hospitals, where you go and buy them off the shelf. They are not the same. Some take time to manufacture. Some, there are restrictions in other countries that when they even give you, you come and change.
Absolutely. Quite important points you have made. And it's important to have that holistic view to things. Is the nation supporting the armed forces? And I know the average Nigerian will also say, well, naturally, we should get the supports too from the armed forces, so it should be both ways. But I'd like to borrow an analogy from the recently concluded AFCON, because I know it's still very much present in our hearts, and I imagine how you went through that match and how you are handling, the outcome. But we're faced with the challenge now, and for that AFCON, a lot of Nigerians were saying, the coach will have changed tactics. We're playing with a different team. It's not the same Cote d'Ivoire we played with in the group stages. So we expected our coach to change tactics. If we had won, maybe we'll have said, well, fantastic tactics. And it speaks to the point. People want results. For too long, we have talked about insecurity in our nation, either terrorism, banditry, kidnapping. We've talked about this. Former president saying we'll change security architecture. In fact, the term then was rejig the security architecture. So it's not like maybe we've not rejigged as we ought to, but we're not getting the results as we ought to. A new administration is here now, and I think I've heard about talks of rejigging, not the term, but you've heard like, okay, we're going to change the whole security architecture and the rest. But this is where we are. So, General, some have said if insecurity or terrorism lasts for this certain period, then obviously there's a hand of government or what have you in it. Nobody knows who really said that because it's been credited to a former head of state. But I'd like you to speak to us from your point of view. How long, ideally, should it really take to end this scourge of insecurity? Should we be battling with this for 10 years or more? Does it make sense?
Well, thank you very much. I think you asked a very valid question, and it comes from the lack of understanding of the threats we are dealing with. Because if you do not understand the threats or the narrative that is on ground, you will give all sort of analogies. And that court, by the way, lacks any antecedents that we're talking about in military parlance. In all the military literature that I've read, I've never seen such, because it's just coined by somebody or being attributed to somebody. And how did he arrive at that? I mean, military operations are based on observations or on what we have done before, and there are rules, and then there are principles of war. Now, what we are dealing with is very complex, and that's what we call it. Either you call it complex military operations or asymmetric warfare, which is a citizen-centric war, which deals with the citizen, because you are not dealing with another country that has invaded you. If you are dealing with an invasion of another country, a state-to-state, these are non-state actors that are dealing with you. They are criminals, they are brothers, they are relations, they speak the same language, and then they are planning evil against you, pure criminality. So in dealing with them is different from when you are talking about dealing with a whole state. And I will give you examples. People that talk as if we are not students of history, military history. How long did it take Northern Ireland, the British government, to actually put the Northern Ireland crisis in place? Over 30 years. And in the end, it was at the sitting table that those things were resolved. How long did it take the French in Indochina? How long did it take the British in Malaysia? The French had to move out from Indochina and hand it over to the Americans. In the end, it was the American citizens that said, bring back our troops. So, in dealing with these citizen-centric things, they used to call them, in those days, they say freedom fighters, or they call them communist rebels and the rest. It depends on where you are coming from. The Africans were calling themselves freedom fighters. The colonialists were calling them communist rebels or something of that sort. They are the same sort of mixture because people are fighting for something. But what is it that is spoiling them? What the oxygen of criminality and criminals and insurgency and terrorists is the citizens. And when you cut off that oxygen from them, they will not survive. What do they want to achieve for the terrorists or insurgents? They want to control the citizens, and the tactics they use sometimes is terrorism. And some say, oh, guerrilla warfare. But because what do they want? They want to frighten the citizens and win their control. But in this sort of banditry on the other side here and kidnappers is criminality. They are looking for this thing, but you mix, it's a whole mix of those. So for you to handle it, you're not taking of these tactics. It's not just a purely kinetic tactics that you need. The non-kinetic or the soft power components takes a better chunk of about 70 to 80%. So how can you assess the non-kinetic or the soft power component now in this war against criminality, insurgency, banditry, and terrorism? Can you give it a percentage of even 20%? I will say no, because you are not. See what Governor Zulum is doing in Borno State, and look at the difference now in Borno State. It shows that when you start leading and providing non or soft power components to the extent to that effect, you see that the kinetic component complements it, and you have a better progressive peace than when you sit down and just rely on a kinetic effort alone without the soft power component. So, yeah.
Yes, if I may butt in, just as you're trying to conclude on that thought, I wanted to find out, because when you look at the success rate of these people you classify as criminals or criminal elements or non-state actors, it appears that our intelligence is not meeting up as much as it should do. I'll give you an example that you're quite familiar with. The carnage on the plateau on Christmas Eve, and then what we've seen in general and all of that. It's like they are a step ahead of us because of the number of casualties we have to record whenever they strike at that scale. So I would like you to speak to the issue of our intelligence in being proactive to be able to stop this menace. Are we failing in that area? Are we not doing enough? Or what exactly is in that gamut of intelligence community?
Well, thank you very much. This speaks to what I've been talking about, the soft power component or the citizens' participation in national security. Now, this intelligence assets you're talking about includes you and me, the citizens. So the failure of even the state itself to teach or to build the capacity of the citizens to observe and report things that are of national security concern itself is an intelligence failure, because the failure of the state. Because these people do not live off the land. These people have collaborators inside. I wish people had gone to the ground and seen what these people have done in Bokos or in all these areas on the plateau. They have known that these are the locations of our troops, of the security agencies. They have actually sometimes even known the numbers, because they go around, they use citizens around to tell you, oh, look, these are the numbers, and even the movement. The Chief of Staff, the Chief of Defense Staff confirmed that sometimes it is Nigerians or citizens who report the movement of troops to them. 2, you cannot go and come into an area that you have not been there before and attack in the night without using night goggles, without having an accurate recce of the area and a map to actually know that these are what and what it is. In fact, if you see how those chaps that took off Bin Laden in Pakistan, they built a replica of his house in where they were practicing how to storm it. Now, these people came and attacked in about 20 locations simultaneously, because they know if they take it piecemeal, the security forces will react to them and deal with them piecemeal, because they will not be able to contain them. So what they devised was that the distance. So even the information given to them, the reconnaissance, they went in, and these are sometimes the strange elements that we're talking about. That when you see strange things happening around a location, they just don't sit down and attack. Some people would have come into that location looking for food, buying food from the food sellers, because they don't live off the land. They have to live from what they have. They would have had a base somewhere.
General,
from that base, they are this thing.
General,
so the citizens themselves will have to help the security agencies to analyze, because they give raw information to the intelligence agencies.
General,
it is these intelligence agencies that analyze.
General, if you can hear me, if I'm a button, before my colleague takes the next question, just on what you're saying, why do you think that the community or the people are not collaborating with the state to give information, rather they are collaborating with the terrorists for the people that do that? There must be a reason.
Well, the reason is that you have not even trained them on what to do. So what they don't even think that is of intelligence value, they give to those people. And because they bring money. Nigerians bring money. You buy information with money. It's very expensive, and they're ready to give money to cut their friendship. They give you money, they are so good, so they talk to you. Not that they are not cooperating with us, but you have not built the capacity of the citizens to understand that what they are doing, although there are criminal elements that will still do what they are doing, that what the information you are giving these people has got intelligence value that can be used against you tomorrow. So you must build their capacity to say, look, if this man is asking this question, let me report that there is somebody who is asking these questions and the rest about our troops, our disposition.
General,
so these are things that, yes, please.
Those reasons regardless, and I want you to take this very quickly because it's just as important. Those reasons regardless, it would seem as if the troops are losing control of our forests. So whether it's Zamfara, Niger, Kaduna, or what's the other states now, Katsina, the forests are in the hands of the bandits. There was a report just last month about how the Nigerian army have abandoned their training base in Kajuru, in Kaduna State. How else is it better training that they require to take control of all those forests and take over them from the hands of the bandits?
Thank you very much. Some years back, when I was president of the Alumni Association of the National Defense College, we did a seminar, we held a seminar on national security seminar, and we talked about our forests, the ungoverned spaces. the communique and the papers are all published, and we send them to government. You see, when you talk about losing our forests, if you want to dominate those forests that you have, then you have to probably bring about 1 million or more boots on ground, including technology and the rest. And see, that's why you have to, when you are talking of building a national security infrastructure and a national security architecture, it's just not just the military alone. Now, when you look at when we were growing up, we had what we used to call forest guards. Those forest guards are the ones who should know everywhere in that forest. Now they are supposed to be observing certain movements in those forests and make reports to the government. These reports are analyzed by the National Security Agency analyzes this and then send it to Mr. President, and the weapon of choice or the arm of choice will be used to dislodge those. But when you don't have forest guards in those areas, or even the numbers, because when we did it, the condition of the forest guards were pathetic, and we sent it to the ministry and the government. They didn't have a scale of salary. They were just there and the rest. Two, our youth today are not adventurous. During my days, we used to go hunting. We used to go archery. We used to go on expeditions into these forests and the rest. We, the youth too, were providing intelligence and information and intelligence to the security forces or to the community. Because if we observe anything in those forests that we used to go hiking, we used to report. So, but if you say that the armed forces will sit down and dominate all those forests, we don't have the numbers. We don't even have the equipment. So it's not that they are ahead of us, it's because we have got the whole thing wrong.
All right, General. Apparently that there's a lot that needs to be done, and we hope that as soon as possible, the people in authority would act and ensure that people are safe, because what we're talking about is basically to ensure that people stop dying as quickly as possible, so we face other challenges of our country. But we need to be alive first to face these challenges. We must thank you, the Pioneer Commander, Multinational Joint Task Force, and the Fellow of War College Abuja, is a retired Army officer, Brigadier General Jonathan Temlong, who joined us via Zoom from Jos. Thank you so much, General, for coming on the program. We're going to shift gears now to other issues on the program, but we'll take this quick break. When we come back, well, one of your influencers will be joining us. He was a reality TV star at some point, and we'll bring you that detail when we come back. Join us again.